Good morning, everybody. Welcome to In Tune with Joon. I'm your host, Joon. Today, we have a new camera angle. Thank you for everyone for donating. We made it. And I am very happy to have such a huge guest list. We had to shrink the font size, as you can see. And we have a lot of people to introduce. So let's get started with the one at the top, the boss baby. Matthias, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining me on this lovely Friday morning. Next up, Emma,
Thank
a
you for
recurring
having
guest,
me.
of course, a recurring guest. We had a little bit of difficulty getting her on, but she's here. How are you doing?
Great, Kia. So good to be
That's
here.
that's great. I like your mason jar, Emma. And Evan just appeared, so let's introduce him. How are you doing? Nice haircut.
Thank you very much. I'm feeling great. I love the camera angle.
Thank you so
I
much.
really like the view.
Okay. I got you, buddy. And next up, he's Kia with an N. Give it up for Keon.
Hi guys, how are you?
Good. We're doing great. And now joining us from Los Angeles, give it up for Lily.
Hi.
Great introduction, Lily. We're going to give it up to Neil, who looks like he has his own streamer set up here. Great lighting there.
It's just a lot of backlight coming in from the window. It'll go in and out. It's a great artsy thing.
Artsy thing, in and out. That sounds like California. That leads us right into Oscar. How you doing, Oscar?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being on. Sky, you're up next. Hello.
Hi, sorry. Hi.
Hi, sorry to you too.
I was on mute. I was on mute because my dad was vacuuming.
That is no problem. We hear no such vacuum.
Okay.
And now joining us from his petit déjeuner, give it up for Daria.
Salut.
Haha, salute. We have a pair of guests on this next panel. Give it up for Zara first.
Nice to see you guys.
Yes. Nice to see you as well. And finally, last but not least, we have a brand new guest. I'd love to have her on. It's Lydia. How you doing? Potentially a little bit of lag from Zara's screen, but that's okay. We'll come back to you guys in the future. Okay. So,
Wait a minute. Lydia Lange?
Yeah, Lydia's right there.
Yeah.
Oh shit! I didn't know. I didn't notice. All right, that's the whole thing. Never mind. Sorry, let's continue.
Great. Now, let's get right into the topic. Groupthink versus individual think. Now, Oscar here introduced me to that topic idea. And I was wondering, is there a way that you wanted to start off this conversation, Oscar, so that we can spin off from what you have to say?
Yeah. So, like, what I meant by positing that question or those topics was that among young people, I've personally noticed that they've been looking at things in a perspective that says that group identity is paramount, and they're sort of seeing the world in this sort of not everybody, of course, but there's this sort of like this identification with the group, and that's the highest thing versus like the ability to think in a way that's pursuant to rational thought and open discussion. And I think that's creating a sort of, take this however you will. I think it's creating a sort of polarization on many perspectives and many fronts here. So that's basically what I find interesting right now, and what I thought would be a good thing to sort of open up with. I don't know what you guys think of that.
Evan, what's up?
What are you suggesting, that there's something inherently irrational or hindering to rational discussion about what you're calling group identity?
I think that there is this idea that, like, if you're of a certain identity, you can't understand or you can't really see the side of someone else, or have them explain to you something about like their experience or like a narrative of their group. And I think it's like preventing, it basically makes it so that people are likely to go and employ ad hominem attacks, ad hominem attacks to sort of out the person rather than look at the idea critically, whatever idea is being discussed. And I think, there's a lot behind this. I mean, there's a lot of things that are sort of part of the how this comes into being. But I think it's not a good way to go about discussing contentious topics, with intricate and important points on both sides, so to speak. So that's kind of how that's what I mean by this whole approach. I've just been noticing it with a lot of younger people, not only younger people, but a lot of younger people, sort of intellectual people or people who are, sort of, trying to figure out the world right now. And I think it can be dangerous because if we attribute sort of an avatar of representation of a group to whoever's speaking without actually looking at their idea. I mean, this sounds so self-evident, but it's like things get messy really quickly,
All right. It's actually, it's hard for me to see hands, by the way, since I have to scroll up and down. So if anyone wants to talk, just start talking. Keon, go ahead.
How broad are we going with this group identity stuff? Because I feel like as human beings, we do have individualistic ideas, but at the end of the day, we sort of thrive or want to become part of a group, or like feeling want to be part of something else that's bigger than them. So usually it comes into a group type of thing with like multiple people that have different ideas and come together, we find something. But I was thinking this group identity, I mean, like I sort of like see as like people are just so about their families, about like family rhetorics, that I sort of put that under like group identity in a way, where people are like all about their family or die, you know what I mean? So that's how I see it. So I don't know how broad you want to get with the whole group identity.
I mean, to answer your question in the best way I can, it's like I think that what we should aim to do in discussing this is try to universalize whatever terms and conditions that could apply to this as widely as possible. So I think anything that fits underneath the definitions of this or the the substructure, I think should be talked about, as best as we can. I think it's very widely universalizable, really. I mean, this whole thing, and I think it's really relevant right now. Just with sort of how discussions seem to go, like online but also in person. When you're talking to someone you don't know and they're just telling you about their ideas, or you're telling them about yours.
Question
So
for you, Oscar.
All right, Neil, go ahead.
This is all very like abstract, and I think that's good, and I think we can come back to it. But can you give me like a concrete example of this that you have seen? Just because I feel like we're all picturing different arguments and different groups and different identities in our heads.
Right, 100%. So like, okay, an example that I would think of is like, say, okay, so say white fragility, for instance. Which now you might think that like that is a characteristic of like white people or something, but there's a lot of this sort of right now with things that have been happening. There's a lot of there's a reactionary stance that a lot of people are taking, and I get why. I mean, it's not like there's nothing to that, and there's not like there's no substrate of history that goes along with that, but there is kind of this attributing personality characteristics, or what should be individual characteristics, to a group identity, essentially. So like that's one of the things that would come to mind. I mean, there's many other things, but it's like there's basically like if a person, say like someone on Facebook is like with Black Lives Matter and a protester, right? And then say like they're talking to someone who's maybe not a protester, and maybe it's a white guy or a white woman or whatever. And, you know, you get like 10 words into the conversation. I'm not talking about like my own experience specifically, but like you get 10 words into the conversation, and then the other person is like, well, you're just a white male. And it basically goes from talking about a subject to talking about everything around the actual subject. And I think it's a grounds for a very inefficient way of communicating. It doesn't attack ideas, it attacks people. And I think it's hypocritical in a sense, because it's actually like just as racist as you know, a white alt-right racist saying something negative about, you know, a black person or something like that. I mean, I don't take it like, if it were directed to me, you know, I wouldn't take it as like a big thing, but it's like, I just don't think people are talking enough about the hypocrisy here and how that actually doesn't help. And we're just using these sort of like straw man and ad hominem attacks to sort of to deal with something which turns out to be a very ineffectual way of dealing with something like that, or anything like that, I would say.
Gotcha.
Hold on, a bunch of people started talking. Who said I mean? I'll let you talk. I think it was Emma.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that you said a lot of things, but I think like to one of your points about, I mean, I see what you're saying about sort of like, let's say you're engaged in an argument and sort of like instead of engage with one of your points, someone is blatantly just like, you're a white man, whatever. But simultaneously, I think as a white man, you have to take responsibility for the fact that like if someone is saying you can't understand this experience, that's a valid response to that. Like if they're explaining why they think that you're not understanding their point or their perspective because you can't, then I think that doesn't like invalidate. Do you see what I mean? Like that's sort of another.
Well,
claim.
yeah. I mean, I think that you have a responsibility if you're engaging in an argument to listen and to listen with an idea that you might learn something from whoever is talking to you. Really, I mean, if we're talking about like, you know, but if it's someone from another background, ethnic background or whatever, it's like, yeah, they maybe have experienced many things. It's chances are they have. But the thing is that they might be talking about a suffering that's more relatable than what they seem to think, because really suffering is the most, like, I guess going back to this individual versus group thing with your thing in mind, Emma, it's like the most you know, yes, you have to listen and think that there's you know, there's something that you haven't experienced for sure. And you should always do that and allow space for that. But I think that it goes too far when it says, when you attribute personal characteristics to a group label, because there are people, the most oppressed person is no group. It is an individual. And you might say that the most oppressed person is a black person or you know, or someone of color, and you might be right in that, but the thing is that the most oppressed person, you can go down a whole road of things that make you oppressed, and it's actually the individual that you wouldn't expect, or and I'm not saying white or black or anyone, but I'm saying it's just like attributing pathology to a group in any sense is negligent beyond belief, in my opinion, and dangerous.
Is this discussion like, what's the framework of this discussion? Are we saying is it what's the positives or the negatives of having group identity or individual identity, to what end? Like are you talking about like social activism or like social movements towards like equality? Is that what the end goal is? Like what's the best way to do that? Is that what you're saying? Is that what this whole discussion is ultimately about?
I mean, it could be about that. Yeah. I mean, I think those are topics that definitely plug into this very, very effectively. I mean, like, you know, there's a lot of people who are behind social equality movements that are very, very, very well intentioned and very smart and very articulate and know a lot of, you know, a lot about what needs to be done to fix problems. But I think that there's also a lot of people who are looking at things in terms of groups to the extent where it's quite polarizing, in social
Yeah,
activist
but-
groups and that are not. And I think that people, I think that people don't know history. A lot of these people don't know history, and they don't know what the philosophy of attributing, pathology to a group label. What that brings forth, really, what that is. And I think it's something we
What
don't
is-
really talk about a lot.
Yeah. What is the history of it?
Well, in Stalinist Russia, they basically all the peasants, they attacked all the previous peasants, the kulaks, who did well or weren't, let's say they attributed class-based guilt to people, essentially. So it was like a resentment of. So it's just grouping people in and assigning a guilt for that group, essentially. You know what I mean? So that's what happened. They murdered them, and they stole all their stuff, and they just completely brutalized them. So I mean, that was like part of the whole thing. It's like this radical equality act based on group versus the individual. And not that I'm not a fan of full on equality, but it's that there is a radical equality which just views the world as group against group and a battleground for that to happen. And I think that's unoverstatedly dangerous. Yeah.
Happening for
You're talking about
centuries, I feel like.
What's
about
that?
Stalin, but
Yeah, Stalinist Russia.
but
right there.
but let's talk about something more local. I mean, American history, right?
Mhm.
You know, they didn't have like anti-miscegenation laws, and like they didn't
yeah.
talk about race until
yeah.
like after Bacon's Rebellion. Like in
Right,
the
and
early
slavery.
70s, it was like we're Christians and the natives are heathens. So it's like the whole category of race was invented to undermine social movements. I mean,
Right.
to undermine like indentured servants and like poor people. So
I'm
I mean,
not
if you want to talk
saying-
about that,
Well, I'm not saying that America hasn't.
that seems to me more relevant if you want to talk about like what Lydia brought up, like social activism or social movements, if that's where you're going with this.
Well,
I don't see that Stalin seems like a red herring. I don't think anyone is saying that Stalinism is awesome.
Right, but when people start talking about sort of like race or ethnic based guilt, essentially like white fragility or things like that, I think that people start to go into that that realm of really looking at people for just their race or class or socioeconomic relationship between those two things.
Identity, right?
Hold on.
What's that?
Lydia, go ahead.
Sorry, just when you bring up white fragility isn't an identity; it's a concept.
Well, it's a concept, but it's attached to identity. So
Yeah.
So if you attach a concept, and fragility is a concept which describes characteristics of a person, if you attach a concept like that to a ethnic origin or background, then you are inherently attributing, the idea that there should be guilt on behalf of that, or some sort of inherent negative flaw there. Which I'm not saying there's not fragile white people in the world. I wouldn't make that case for a second. I know quite a few of them, but it's when you attach a concept like that to a group, then you have essentially sort of a derivation or a parallel of a class-based guilt system, like what happened in Stalinist Russia. So that's why I bring that up right there.
I think if I can interject, what I'm hearing, or my opinion, my action, is the problem that we're talking about here, or that I think you're kind of feeling and touching upon, is like an group identity kind of flattens individual, right? And that can be like, that's what racism, or I think that's one of the ways racism can be really destructive, right? If you say, oh, like this person, is this stereotype, and it kind of removes any
It's
kind
a generalization that hurts
individual
the individual
spirit kind of bit. And on the other hand, when you say, oh, you're a white male like that's also kind of removing your individual ability to empathize, something like that, right? So
Yes, yes.
I don't know.
It's
I
removing
think-
your ability to actually think for yourself.
Well, can I interject
And to
for a
think
moment?
is what it's removing.
So one question I wanted to ask everyone here, just, tell me if you disagree, but basically I think we all agree here that we're aiming in, whether it's social change, whether it's this discussion right here, we discuss ideas, correct? That's the goal, to discuss ideas.
Podcast, Kia.
Definitely.
No, but that's what I'm saying. Like the goal is that we discuss ideas. Okay, if we can agree with that,
No,
I think
the point is to change the world.
so. Yeah, ultimately, I agree with that as well. But what I was trying to get at is that I think part of what Oscar is saying is that sometimes groupthink doesn't allow for ideas to be as fleshed out as they could be. Is that accurate?
I'd say almost always.
Okay, so you firmly believe that what I said is true. Okay. Well, if we all believe in discussing ideas, maybe we can. I think we've identified. Go ahead, Matthias. What is it?
That when I hear groupthink, first thing that comes to my mind is like a psychology of crowds, right? Which kind of immediately is like a whole. I mean, I guess this is basically also what we're talking about here. Like the psychology of the crowd is kind of different than each individual person's psychology. They're two totally different animals. I feel like it's worth talking about what are the potential dangers of crowd psychology versus individual psychology when we're talking about like delicate issues. I don't know.
Well, that's almost like rewording the topic. Yeah, I think it's completely relevant. So
why would we disagree with that dichotomy? Because your individual psychology is related to your socialization. So
I'm talking like specifically about the psychology of crowds, right? Like the way how.
Oh, Matthias disconnected from the call. Okay, well, he'll be back to explain his point, I'm sure. Okay. Well,
Muted by Discord.
Matthias just dipped, I guess, but he'll be back. Don't worry. Is he back?
Hold on.
Yeah,
back.
he is back. Okay. Hi. What were you saying?
About to say just that I think when we're talking of what I hear groupthink, I think specifically about how psychology can kind of quickly evolve into like lynchings and that kind of stuff. I'm not really thinking about like, group identity necessarily in terms of like, I don't know, African Americans, white Americans, I don't know what else in America.
Well, okay, Matthias, to rein your
Korean
example into
Americans,
something,
right? I feel like those are groups. I think those aren't necessarily group think. You know what I mean?
I think I understand what Matthias is saying. I think he's talking about the difference of what would you be doing if you're protesting alone, let's say against police brutality versus protesting with hundreds or thousands. Or
that's why they use pepper spray, right? Because it kind of breaks you're in this crowd psychology. Then they spray you with pepper spray, and immediately, because of I guess like the pain and blah blah blah, that it breaks you out of that crowd psychology and turns you into like an individual running away. You know what I mean? So
that's interesting.
Pain will do that to you.
But I'm just saying that there's a specific reason that the police are using pepper spray.
That's true.
Yeah, if you're not ready for it, pain will do that. It's true.
Right. So actually, I take back what I said. I think it's relevant, but what Oscar is talking about is slightly different from what Matthias is talking about here. I think Oscar was focused more on identity. Matthias is focused. I think Matthias is really focused on like the numbers, not necessarily like,
but I don't know.
Anyway,
I guess I feel like they feed into each other, right?
Yeah, Zara, did you want to say something?
I also wanted to point out that there are some like real important positives to group identities, because otherwise you're not really going to be
like your group
Hold on. Well, let's let Zara finish. One second.
you're not really going to recognize. I mean, take into consideration if whenever you're frustrated at something or something's happening to you, and then there's a person who identifies with the same frustration, and you don't even have to explain it because they've experienced it as well. And it just like helps to identify these issues and like bring them to the light and actually be able to change them. I don't know. I think that's a pretty freaking important part about group identity.
Yeah.
Helps you navigate the world.
Good point. Did you want to comment on that, Oscar? Do you have a counterpoint, or are you okay with that point?
I mean, well, there's, I would say that you'd be a fool to think that group identity isn't important to some degree. I mean, I think that it's important. I mean, people in certain groups are more likely to experience certain things, and people who have experienced certain things can get through them more effectively, and talking about them and outlining
like the pandemic
experience similar things is a great way to build yourself up. Yeah, but so I would say that group identity is certainly important, but when people are starting to but when people actually take part in attributing to characteristics of a personality to a group in any direction, take this any way you want, I think that's where you draw the line right there, because that's when you start to have, and it might seem harmless, you might say it's just, well, like white people are the colonials who've just, fucked everybody over in the world, and you might view the history that white people have some penance to make for that. But I think that when you start attributing those characteristics to any group specifically, it's
Oscar, you cut off. We don't hear you right now. Oscar, we don't hear you at all. Okay, I don't think he's aware that we don't hear him. He might not hear us, possibly. Yeah, we don't hear you. Try disconnecting from the call and reconnecting. So just to answer to what he said quickly, I suppose, while he's figuring out his technical difficulties. I think that there's a difference between having an issue with, let's say, white supremacy versus having an issue with an individual white person. I think those are two different things, and that sometimes it's easy to get that mixed up as, let's say, a white person. You think, oh, well, why are they attacking me, even though you have an issue with white supremacy. And I think maybe Oscar might be blurring those lines himself. I think that it's okay to, let's say, be white and hate white supremacists. I don't see an issue with that, and I don't think that has anything. What's that, Matthias?
You just say it's okay to be white?
That's not my point. Is that like, yeah, my point is that attacking white supremacy is not attacking white people. I think there's a difference.
Kind of want to riff off of that, Kia.
Sure.
And what you and Oscar were saying. Yeah, so I kind of see Oscar's point about the labels, because my question I'd like to like kind of throw in the mix too is like, how much has market in this country, of course, only the US, not the West, not anything, just US speaking. How much is marketing really influenced our idea of like what group identity is, right? Because this was not a conversation. Marketing, yeah, because this was not a conversation we were having in the 90s and the 2000s. This really popped up in the 2010s, really.
You attribute that to marketing, like by corporations?
I mean, yeah.
Do you give an example just so I can kind of understand where you're coming from?
Sure. I'll give you a couple, like Amazon putting Amazon putting a banner, right, that says, we support Black lives, like, or
like how on the month of July, every single company has like the LGBT logo.
Yeah,
And then we can even talk about like
June.
the
But not
LGBT
even.
flag, right?
Right, but so not
Yeah,
even.
that was last month. It was June.
Yeah.
So, but not even
really?
that.
Okay.
Not even when it's like bandwagon month. When it's like, okay, everybody, let's get on board. We knew July was coming, or June was coming. We know June was coming. Let's make everything gay. That's one thing. But also, I mean, that's cynically is how it is. That's their departments for that. But
Right.
That is how it is.
either that there's people on standby as well. You know, no matter. When I say marketing, it's not only attached to selling a product. It's also if you are a person, if your person is a brand, or if your lifestyle is a brand, or it's just the idea of public image in general.
Okay.
When
I was
you're-
gonna
when
say,
you're-
when are you gonna tie this to like social media and public image? But that's kind of the link you just made.
So anything with, I won't get into nitty gritty, but any public image that's involved, we can assume there's marketing behind it. And I think that like it's amazing that when you're on, people are on standby for like something happens, like George Floyd happens, and they're kind of on standby, no matter if they're a little operation or a big operation. And they're like, okay, now we got to show everybody that we care about Black people. Like now. Like,
Okay.
I don't want it in one day. I don't want it in 1 week. We need to do it right now, or else nobody's gonna buy my shit, or everybody's gonna hate me. That's one thing. So that's my question. But to get a little deeper with like what I wanted to kind of tie what I like what everybody was saying. I think that in this country, group identity has been taken like way too far. I think that we have, like usual, we have concentrated too much on one part of an issue, of a bigger issue, and we're so focused on that it kind of overshadows everything else. So like I think like group identity is like it shows like this discussions that we're having in this country about group identity shows how much like I think it shows our ability to systemize everything, right? Like that's like this systematic rationalization of it. Like, you're gay, you fit here in the LGBTQ box. That's where you are. Oh, you're Black, you fit in this BLM box.
So you mean like compartmentalizing then?
Yes, and compartmentalizing, is a tool we use all the time. That's like how we build an industrial society and things like that. So I think it's epidemic of that. I also, though, I take a more cynical view of it and think that, like, grouping people together, and this does go back to marketing, but then unfortunately spirals into it could spiral for political reasons, right? Because group identity is politics, right? So when you group people together, or when you see people grouping together, that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing, right? It depends on how you play the situation. If I see a bunch of African Americans getting together and protesting, right? If I make the issue, if we concentrate as a society on making the issue only an African American problem, you're not Black, you're white, why are you out there? Or you're Mexican, or you're Latino, why are you fucking with you're not as oppressed, you're Middle Eastern, right? Et cetera, so right? When you do that, you're not alienating people from joining the group necessarily, you're alienating the group itself. So group identity for me is like classic alienation in this country. It's classic. It's like, now all the Black people are here. That's good. We know where the threat is. We know where they're coming from. We know what they sort of want. We kind of know what they want, So let's avoid it. Let's make it a one deal issue. It's this police brutality. It's a Black people problem. It is not a Latino problem. It is. I mean, they're trying. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's what's going on. They're trying. They really try to push that narrative. So to get to my point, I think if you get people to identify with one group, they will comprise the majority of their identity with that group. I think that's what Oscar was saying about labels, like and concepts, like I'm being African American means this, and so and this is what I am. So,
Okay.
Yeah, more boxes.
So
I think that's
so. Hold on. I'm gonna hold everyone's horses back. Okay.
I need to finish. My
go.
point is like
Go
half done. I don't want to like launch it before.
Sorry, you've been talking for like 10 minutes.
Well, I also didn't talk for 10 minutes, so I'm trying to balance it out. Okay,
right,
sorry.
Wrap up your point.
Emma.
Okay, it's
Emma
fine.
was-
It's fine.
Emma
So
was-
what I wanted to do anyway, I'd like to go on a break when a big question or a lot of points have been brought up, so that when we come back, we can address everything he said. On top of that, some people need to leave us. So I think it's a good time to go on a quick break. We can think about what Daria said. Daria, if you can reiterate your question once we come back, I would appreciate it. But for now, we're going to go on a break, and we'll be right back. All right, we are back from the break. Hopefully, everybody has had a chance to freshen up, grab a snack, use the restroom, however they choose. We have Lydia, who is going to summarize Daria's thought, and Daria might add something to the end. So take it away.
I don't know if it was a summary, but this is what I came away or was thinking along the lines as he was speaking, was that what I find ironic about the idea of groupthink in the context that we're talking about, like identity politics, where I think that might be the overarching idea, but actually in reality, within identity politics, you end up having these like fractionalizations of identities that become so small. So it's like everything has a sub thing that in the end, those identities that are supposed to be within a wider identity become so detached from each other in all these different ways that it's actually not a group mentality, because there's all these individual identities. So it's harder to have an overarching identity of a group thing, because ultimately you end up having all these different fractions within those wider identities, and it becomes actually more individualistic, I think. Yeah.
Daria, do you want to add?
Yeah, really quickly, that exactly what Lydia said is why, and like we've arrived to the point in the US where an LGBTQ can't really understand, and a BLM can't really get, they're different. A PETA and a Greenpeace, they don't get along. And Antifa is borderline terrorized and doesn't belong in the left. I think that's why we're so splintered.
Okay. Now...
Just
Sorry,
also, just to add in,
I heard
because
Zara.
I think,
Okay, you want to add?
actually,
Go ahead, Matthias. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me add.
Go ahead.
One comment that you said, Kia, a while ago that really stuck with me was that in this era, I think landscape of technology today has a lot to do with it, because you said that in the era where we all feel kind of atomized, fragmented, alone, separated, blah, 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 that I think this incentivizes and kind of makes us thirsty for this groupthink. And also, just another thought I had was talking about how everything kind of like fractalizes into new identities. This is also kind of like how the algorithms work, right? Like we kind of get put in this box, and then it slowly kind of like exploits, or I don't know if it's the right word, just notices our, I don't know, data, that one box that it kind of building and adding and blah blah blah, that you're kind of totally on this island alone.
Okay.
Even though on the internet you're kind of feeling, oh, like I'm part of blah 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 blah, but actually it's just you, and it's just like your algorithm totally putting blinds on your eyes. You have no idea, like it's totally individualized and you won't even know it. So it's kind of like this illusion. I don't know.
Okay, Zara, I think you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I'd like to. I agree with all of this, and I think that's why something like intersectionality is so important, because for everyone to understand that they're not one identity, they're an intersection of so many different identities, and that everyone has everyone has privilege in some way, whether it's like, you know, you're able-bodied, or, you know, like your race or your gender, or there are so many different identities that it's just important to, you know, realize, again, you're at the intersection of multiple different things, and that is, you know, that's important. Like,
in other words, nuance.
Yeah, exactly.
I had some brief thoughts that I
Nuance is
wanted to
missing a
share on the matter, and I just lost my train of thought. So somebody else is going to take over.
I had a thought that
Well,
was
now I lost my train of thought.
All right, let's not let Emma lose her train of thought. Go ahead, Emma.
No, this is sort of related to like a few things that have been said, but it's actually just this there's this Andrea Long Chu article, and it's called "The Impossibility of Feminism," and it's really good if anyone wants to read it. But basically, she makes this entire argument about how like there's 70s feminism. And I mean, so the reason I bring this up is because like I'm thinking about group identity as it relates to like particular goals, like specific goals for achieving equality in whatever sense. But so anyway, so 70s feminism was really focused on bad sex and the fact that women had a lot of really bad sex. And so that was like the goal was to make sex itself better. And then that rhetoric shifted because it wasn't really achieving anything. There was no like actionable consequence of pointing out that women were having a lot of bad sex. And so the rhetoric instead, like 80s feminists changed it to be about sexual assault and rape. Because if you make something sexual assault and rape, then it's an actionable offense. Like you can actually persecute someone for raping someone else. And the thing is like the problem with that rhetoric, as great, the thing is like, you know, that was a huge step forward for feminism and for, you know, survivors of sexual assault. But at the same time, there's this whole, you know, subsection of bad sex, like cat person and like all these sorts of experiences that don't fall under this rhetoric of like rape. And so people are like ignoring that. They're saying like, whatever, if it's not rape, it doesn't count. And so sort of my point in this is just to say that like at the same time, as much as that, like, you know, it's sort of, I think it's so hard to move forward in groups when there's nothing sort of like when you feel like you can't concretely achieve something. And so sometimes, you know, you achieve something and it's positive and it's sort of like, I guess the reason I was thinking about this is like people were sort of talking about these splinters within groups. And of course, like a lot of feminists, I mean, Andrea Long Chu does not like this sort of only rape counts sort of rhetoric. But I mean, I guess I was just trying to point out the complication of like, how do you move forward if you don't sort of make choices and if you as a group don't come together to fight for a cause, you know, sort of like what's the alternative? Is it stasis? Is there like a better way of doing this? Yeah.
I had a quick note that I wanted to make. That I remembered my thought and it's relevant to what Emma is saying. I wanted to add that in any group, you always have very vocal minorities. What Matthias was saying about technology is that I think the ideas that differ from the norm trying to get propelled up by the algorithm. Now, I'm not going to point to whether I know this is true or not. We've seen some examples of it happen all the time. So I would let's go with the premise that this is true, like that social media promotes like kind of differing views. Like if everyone's posting the same thing about BLM, somebody who posts something different has a better chance of getting more engagement.
Don't think it promotes differing views. I think it promotes views that actively like sensationalize and trigger a hardcore response. Right?
Sure.
I
And
feel like that's
agree with
different
that.
from just
Flash.
views.
The flash
I have
stuff.
something to say on that in a minute, Kia.
yeah,
Marketing.
I'm gonna wrap it up. Don't worry. I know I've been
Like
talking.
psyop conspiracies, Matthias.
Okay, let's not get too derailed. But what I did want to say on that is that before, the vocal minorities did not represent the group. It seems to people outside of the group that vocal minorities now represent the group, and they use arguments against vocal minorities as arguments against a group. I've seen this with feminism. I've seen this with BLM. I've seen this with people demanding the Schneider cut for a movie of Justice League, for example. Like there are constantly, yeah, that's a whole thing. But I want to rein it in. There are people that are like not even 1% of the group that have more engagement than the majority who think a certain way, and they become the faces of the group, whether the group wants it, whether outside people want it, and that leads to a lot of confusion and a lot of, I think, yeah, let's just say confusion. Neil, go ahead.
Just going
Oscar, I'll
off
let
of
you speak after Neil.
what Matisse was saying with like social media, like I don't think it's trying to I guess what a lot of the goal is for a lot of it is just to strengthen and confirm your beliefs.
Correct.
And like I'm thinking about like social media posts, and I'm thinking of like Facebook and Instagram like memes from like 2015, 2017 that like totally separated US politics,
Sure.
like left and right. And like there's memes like there's what's the White House website? I'm totally blanking on it. But there was like
The
indictments.
Obamacare one or no?
No, there's like U.S. indictments, and like you can download these like government like FBI files of like all these memes that were posted that were just like modern day propaganda, and they're like very innocent
Cambridge
on the
Analytica.
surface. Yeah, and like they're very innocent on the surface, but like it's there to like be like, oh, I am confirming this belief and like strengthening this belief, and like it is there to divide. I totally lost my train of thought
That's all good.
in this ramble, but like you know that's there, and like I totally lost my train of thought.
That's fine. Oscar, do you want to step in? You had something to say?
Well, I liked what Neil was saying, but I wanted to just interject on something that you said, Kia.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to see if this is an accurate summary of what it was. Are you saying that there are these small sections of groups that think that they have the accurate ability to speak on behalf of as a representative of the whole group? Is that what you're saying?
No.
And that. Oh, okay.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying whether they want to or not, whether the group wants to or not, they're propelled forward, and their individual opinion gets attributed to the group because of how social media algorithms work and virality, etc.
So the extreme
thing is, yeah.
Let Oscar finish, then you can step in, Matthias.
Yeah, go ahead.
So are you saying the extreme ideas of the individual in the group that get put forth by the media kind of like hinder the transference of actual group of what the perceived or acclaimed group values are?
I see it that way. I mean, I don't think
they make it look
less than a percentage of anything is not representative of that thing. So I think that I wish algorithms promoted loud and uniform voices rather than the fringes. That's what I'm trying to say.
But that would imply that they have that a group has homogenous views. You know, I mean,
of course, there are people in groups who share views. Yeah, of course.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, Matthias, you want to say something?
I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Evan, you're next. Sorry about that.
I can go?
Go ahead.
Just go. About the kind of extremist voices being the loudest, my first thought, it's not entirely related, but I feel like it might be related, is that this is actually how like the US electoral system works, right? With the primaries. So the way the primaries are working is that it incentivizes that the candidates have to appeal to the most extreme parts of the electorate, and then the general election they have to kind of whiplash back to the general middle. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it makes me wonder whether this is kind of something about American culture or American society that kind of privileges this kind of system and these kinds of incentives. Or maybe it could just be that the extreme voices tend to drive the agenda in general. And
that's a good question.
How it is.
Okay. Evan, I'll let you say what you wanted to say. You don't have to respond to what Matthias said necessarily.
Yeah, no, I mean, that has nothing to do with Matthias' thing. This is actually in response to what Emma was saying, you know, about like, I think you can only have any kind of goal, you know, any kind of movement if you have a concrete goal, whether that's like about sexual assault or I think, for example, you know, defund the police. I think that's a great like concrete goal. And now we're not talking about like, oh, what is this? What is a Black person's experience? What is blah, blah, blah? It's like, okay, if you think that police brutality disproportionately affects Black people, obviously defunding the police is going to benefit them, but it's like a concrete thing, or like, oh, I want to like prosecute more rapists or something. Like, and you need groups getting together and like in solidarity and like united for a common goal. And I think that's like a, you know, putting ideas into practice. I think if you just talk about ideas in the abstract, like people always talk about, oh, let's have this conversation. Like, no, fuck the conversation. Like, what are you putting on the table? And that's like something people are not putting on the table, which is great. And you need more of that. And I mean, I think this also gets into what Zara was saying about like intersectionality is like, I mean, there's various ways of talking about like intersectionality. I feel like there's like a danger of going in two directions. One is more like the atomization, where there's all these different groups, and then there's the other one, which is more like solidarity, like across whatever groups. And I think that it's important to steer in the other direction, and I'll always to put it into practice of like what are the goals you want in this moment.
Okay, well put, Evan. Does anyone want to answer? Yeah, Dario, go ahead.
I kind of wanted to answer Matthias and riff off
Go
of
for it.
Evan, if that's cool. So, oh, great. On the spotlight, and I blink. Oh, yes. I think keeping the I think it's to a lot of people's benefit to keep a conversation confined to the abstract. So let's just only talk about it. All we need to do is just talk about it, And I think there's been a lot of pandering recently, giving 150, taking 150 million out of the LAPD and giving it to, underprivileged communities. I think that was like a very big PR move. That's still controversial. It's pretty controversial. So people are like, no, but the money's there. At least there's some money. And then you're like, but they didn't solve anything. And so that's dangerous. That's one example of answering Matthias' question, I'd say. That quelling action seems to be in the game. But then I also wanted to just quickly add that Keon said earlier something about human instinct to group together. I totally agree with that. It is, because we like to group together and fight for our common interest. But confining a group to only one purpose, what is your platform? What's your goal? What do you want to achieve? Telling them that you've done it now, that's your function, it's been completed, now you can disband. It's over. Please, Blacks, disperse again. Go back to your ghettos. LGBTQs, go back to West Hollywood. You got what you wanted. You got get married. It's fine. And that's a very dirty trick. It's a very dirty trick. It's no, I'm not as a group. If I'm a bunch of individuals that gather together as a group, we're not here to fight for one cause. We're here to fight for a human cause. We're humanity. Doesn't matter if, all lives matter, right? And it shouldn't matter what, okay, imagine we do end police brutality. That is not, Black people have not completed their function. If police brutality, now we should still protest, we should still fight, we should still get out, we should still continuously move to change. So, all this kind of fiery rhetoric to say that, I do feel like group identity is used to be your function is done, go back. We don't want to hear you anymore.
I actually disagree, because I feel like it kind of just waters down all the issues to the point where it's just kind of feel good, we're all in it together, let's march to the streets, then go back home. I feel if you have a group and you have a mission and you accomplished a mission and then you decide, okay, let's disband the group, I don't see anything wrong with that, right? I feel like that's fine.
True, but would you say that's what's going on? Is that
where in the U.S. with
our reality? Has it been in the past? I would say since the 60s. Has that been concurrent with our reality?
I think if in the United States, African American community reached a point where they felt that they were no longer needing to push for the cause that they want, I think that would be a win, right? They felt, well, now we can just go live our lives. I feel like that would be ideal. I think they would want that.
Right. But that's not what we're saying.
But Daria's asking, has that happened?
No, it's rhetorical. I'm saying no, it hasn't.
How can it happen if we kind of say, oh, this is a mission for humanity, right? I actually feel like this is exactly what's stopping any progress for the African American community. That kind of other groups come in and co-opt it and say, actually, we're fighting for all the civil rights. Kind of no, we need to focus on these specific civil rights so we can solve them and then move on to the next issue. You know what I mean?
For me, they're together. These are the issues, but please let's not make it only about us. Or please don't make it only.
How can they be together?
I think the BLM speech was they were really good. They really made it sound like, I think a lot of people try to make them sound like they're only talking about themselves, which I was very upset about. He said, no, they're the most disenfranchised community is fighting for the rest of us. We should join. And then after that, that's not their only function.
The issue I have with that is that I think, I don't know, this is just my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
I think African American situation in the United States is in America. I think it's unique to the United States of America. And so that's why I have issues if you have like Filipinos coming in and saying, oh, like actually we have the same issues. Like, no, you don't. Like the history is different. The issues are different. I really feel like this is just a way to whitewash and water down and distract from the issues of the African American community. I feel like this has been, I think it's like on purpose, to be honest, going back way back decades.
On that note, I'd like to go on break number 2. There are some of us who need to leave, and we can think about what we want to start off with. Maybe we can discuss that when we come back from the break. But for now, we'll be right back. All right. Thanks for sticking around. We're back from the break. We're down a few, but not out. We have plenty of brains sitting in Jell-O around some skeletons right here. And I thought we could change the subject. So right now, we're obviously in the middle of a pandemic. And as some of you may know, the U.S. has not successfully flattened the curve. And a lot of states that were reopening are now rolling back on some of those measures. And we're, in fact, sort of like the coronavirus epicenter of the world at the moment. Now, actually, I'm not sure if it's Brazil or here, but, you know, among the two.
Definitely America.
Yeah, probably. So in regards to groupthink versus individual think, I would argue that in combination with, I'm going to group flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, into sort of like an anti-science movement, like sort of a rejection of what scientific authority has to say. Not that I feel like it has a strong presence in America, I'm sure around the world, but we're going to focus on in America and how this group has led to, well, the spread of coronavirus, rejection of protection against coronavirus, COVID-19, I should say. And I wanted to ask why you think this is. We were talking in the break. Matthias started answering the question, but why is it that it's so hard for some people to just wear a mask or be 6 feet away from each other in the middle of a pandemic? Why do you think that is?
I was talking about it with a friend of all of ours, Daniela. I was talking with her. Why are people so? She works in the entertainment industry. Why are people, especially Los Angeles, is kind of like the pedestal, I think. But why are people so goddamn entitled here? Because I mean, I didn't really notice it in my other. They're so entitled. It's unbelievable. And just because they have a condo with a Tesla, like, dude, what are you talking? Everybody has a condo. Like most people do. Like, why do you think you're so special? Like, you know, this economic growth that our country is always like just having, just like this more money, more, right? And of course, for the privileged classes, not for, you know, taking this into account. I think it comes with a certain level of entitlement. Like, you know, I have money. I think I have power. I think I have this and that. Why should I like bend to it? Everybody wants to be the leader. That's what I think. Everybody wants to be the fucking leader. So they walk around like it.
It's actually, sorry.
Can I make a point as well?
Yeah, please.
Lydia, go ahead.
I think I totally agree with you. And I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I think it's an interesting thing where I think generally a lot of Western society, there's like an inability to believe that like bad things actually happen there. Like,
I agree.
In the sense that I remember when the whole coronavirus thing happened and speaking to my dad, and he was like, right, way earlier before like, you know, shut down or even the idea that was going to happen. My dad obviously like, you know, left Iran during the revolution and has experienced lots of shit, was like, you need to like prepare, like this bad stuff is coming. And I had this kind of like, okay, like very like And he was like, it's because people in Western countries can't really concretely understand that bad things could happen to them. Like, in the kind of cultural context, it's like, oh, bad stuff happens elsewhere. And I'm making a generalization, but I think it's an interesting thing to tie into the idea of like a certain level of entitlement. Like, I don't need to do this thing because there's not a concrete understanding that something bad could actually happen, or like, you know what I mean? I don't know if that
yeah,
is really
our society
relevant, but
it's too perfect. Everything's so perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I think in the West, there's a kind of tendency to kind of say, well, yesterday was great. Since yesterday was great, tomorrow has to be great as well, which is a totally false kind of notion. I agree.
I wanted to, at one point, bring up the COVID-19 response in Vietnam. I'm not sure if this information is still accurate because it was from like 2 months ago or so, but they were able to control spread of COVID-19 very effectively. I think they had double-digit cases, not even deaths, like cases in all of Vietnam. And of course, there are some people who their gut instinct is, oh, well, how accurate is that? And I think that's the wrong way of thinking. I think that there's a lot that we can learn from Eastern response to COVID-19.
I agree, Kia.
They know what they're doing.
Yeah, and
they know.
like they ran TikTok campaigns. There were TikTok, like it was on Last Week Tonight. If you guys watched John Oliver, he reported on how Vietnam had these viral TikToks, viral, no pun intended. These TikToks that taught how to socially distance, taught how to properly wash your hands for 20 seconds, wear a mask, etc. And it was apparent. Well, I'm sure that is a part of why it was so effective. And of course, whether the culture accepts that or not is a part of that. I would argue, like you guys are saying, that Western culture does not accept that, and that we were asking, well, why is this? That idea that danger happens elsewhere. Yeah, maybe I'm rambling a little too long. Someone want to hop in?
I think it's ingrained in them to be more humble.
Okay.
They're just humble people.
First of all, I think we need to mention, right, that East Asia and that area has had experiences with pandemics before.
Yeah.
So they had contingency plans and they knew what to expect. Versus in the West, we've never even seen a pandemic since like 100 years. You know what I mean? But like, for example, I can't speak about Vietnam. For example, South Korea. First, they had the SARS, right? They had MERS. So the government really understood what to do if this scenario happened. And meanwhile, of course, in the U.S., fucking Trump threw out the pandemic handbook and blah, 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 blah. But even in the West, the response has been different, right? We have like the Swedish that basically ran a social experiment. We have.
Do you want to elaborate on that? What do you mean? What do you mean the social experiment exactly?
Yeah, this is wild. This is actually wild.
that they were just like, you know what? We're not going to do anything. We're just going to let it burn. And
I didn't hear that.
Yeah. We're not gonna,
yeah,
you didn't know that?
No, I didn't
literally
like it's the worst.
That's just
like it's.
Swedish people have told, like I have Swedish friends, they were like, that's what's going on. It's not even a conspiracy. It's just like, let it burn out.
Wow.
But
it was pretty, I think, inhumane.
What happened? Nothing
immoral.
I mean, but it was immoral.
The idea
they could trust their population more than we can trust our population. Let's just put it. And we're also 300 million. That's another,
But I agree with Matthias when he says the idea of it. It sounds immoral.
Of course,
but the thing is, their idea was that, you know what, actually the economic fallout would be worse than the pandemic. So we are just choosing to manage the virus. We are confident we can manage it, and so we're going to do it. But actually, they made a mistake. The economy collapsed regardless. You know what I mean? Like, it's Sweden, 10 million people. Like, everyone around them was locking down, so they weren't saving any economy. But I wanted to say, which is interesting, is I think culture, you guys were pointing out, has a big role as well. Because one story I heard that was interesting was that Switzerland is also having a lot of issues with managing the virus. And like the Swiss people are also refusing to wear the masks. I thought, and they also love their guns, right? So I thought, well, there's definitely something in common with the United States there. I haven't really like,
And it's guns.
but it's kind of. I think it's also like this hardcore
guns.
individual maximized
Go ahead.
understanding.
So,
They don't
so,
have-
so
They don't have the
individualism.
British automatic weapons,
Well,
but-
well, is individualism something that is culturally prevalent in Switzerland? I don't know. Is that?
I think when we think about Switzerland, right? They have direct democracy. Like every single canton has like their own little thing, right?
Oh, so it sounds
I
like a
think
state, huh? Okay.
Yeah, so I think they're very much, they're all each in their little alpine valley. I don't think they're really concerned much beyond that. I kind of feel it's probably the same in America.
Geography, man. Totally. Geography.
I know for sure.
Oh, like literally isolated? Like, is that what you're pointing out?
Oh, but isolated, and also like from the geography, the kind of government they have because of that, and the way the government structure kind of informs the culture, right?
Cool.
They're kind of, yeah. I think
that's
look
cool
at
stuff.
the
I want to let Evan talk. He hasn't talked in a while.
I mean, there's this meme I saw going around like a week ago. It's like, it's like they were being conditioned for something. And the first picture is like, a little mask, then a bigger mask, and the last one is like a hijab.
Are you serious?
That's insane. I mean, the point about this is like a kind of like fear of, I think, infringement on individualism is the keyword. It's infringement on individual rights. And it's about, I want my life to go back to normal. I want to go back to my job. So I think I agree with what Lydia and Matthias were saying earlier. Like there is this like sense sometimes that bad things can happen in America, but like last I checked, the highest spike was in Florida, and in that hellscape, I think people know that bad shit can happen. But it is about like I don't want the government telling me what to do. I don't want them like controlling my life. I'm afraid that they're going to infringe on my rights in their response to this pandemic if I give them more power. I don't know about the Swiss situation, but I think there's definitely that sense of individualism as bringing about a kind of like almost paranoid response to any kind of like collective or state action.
So you
Also-
would, yeah, go ahead, Zara. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to put a point in there that also Swiss people in my when living there, they're very entitled as well. So I think that has to do with it as well.
So there's a common theme of entitlement, individualism.
That's it.
Is it about to die?
I wouldn't say
We hear you.
individualism.
Okay,
I don't know.
Dario, go
I
ahead.
don't know everything.
I just want to clarify. I wouldn't say individually. I'd say narcissism, because being
Okay.
maybe they're the same.
Hold on. Let Daria finish.
I think everybody should being an individual is being able to also know when you should be when you should not be an individual. Like it should be
being a healthy individual.
Yeah, being a healthy. You're right. But I think that's another problem we have here. This is why the pandemic. I'm not surprised why numbers go up, because it's like everything's black and white here. It's always we always talk about binary opposition. Like here we fucking go. It's like there's no middle ground for anything here. It's either black, white, cold, hot, and you're like when you
Daria,
do that,
funny
Daria,
enough, a pandemic is a black and white situation. You're either dying or you're not.
But I think it's
that's
interesting
bad
because
thinking. That's not
Why do you think? Well, okay, I didn't really think before I said that. Let's let Evan respond, and I'll come back to it.
Hey, your Freudian
1 second.
slip shows how ingrained it is in us.
I'll come back to it. Let Evan speak. Evan, then Matthias. Then I'll retract.
How about this framing? Let's say I'm a guy in Texas or Florida, and I'm sick of these pandemic measures, and I want to go back to work, and all of these elite liberals who can afford to work remotely, whose lives have not been changed aside from the fact that they stay home and watch Netflix more, are telling me what to do with my life, and I tell them to fuck off.
Yeah,
and that seems to be like a kind of individualism that like
I would take the Texas side.
You could start to sympathize with, whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's more than just narcissism.
You're right, Evan. No, you're totally right. It is more than just narcissism. But then I don't think the general trend deviates from narcissism. I gotta tell you, I don't really see it like at least I don't see it here in LA,
Okay, let's let Matthias hop in.
I also want to add that I thought I mean, I'm not surprised. I thought it's worth mentioning how somehow always included this pandemic politicized, right? So that suddenly it wasn't like, oh, there's a pandemic. Suddenly it's like, oh, well, my red team says there's not a pandemic, so I gotta go invade Michigan Capitol with some guns and tell them like, fuck off. And then you have the blue team, like these assholes, you know, like endangering everyone. It's like, how can this be? You know?
That's
like
they do.
yeah.
Black, white,
totally
they do.
outside the necessary state of mind.
Spectrum.
This is the issue. The issue isn't whether you believe in one thing or the other. It's the fact that both of these two halves of the population have their dicks in their hand trying to politicize this thing, which makes the government incapable of actually formulating an effective response, right? Because the issue is all these half-assed measures, kind of one way or the other, you know, and end result is a half-assed quarantine. You know, economy is trash, and yeah, I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but I think.
Does Oscar? Do you have something you want to say by any chance? We haven't heard from you in a bit.
I'm just listening.
Okay,
you know?
all good. All good.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to add, in response to Daria saying that's a wrong way of thinking. When I said that a pandemic is a black and white issue, this is what I can elaborate on. You're either taking measures against. Let me phrase this properly. You're either fighting against a pandemic, against getting the disease. You're supporting contact tracing. You're following restrictions set by like bodies that have set rules like the CDC, or you're not following these measures, and as a result, you're probably endangering others. So that's what I meant when it's black and white. I don't see. I don't see how it's not.
The realm of decision making doesn't belong in an either or situation. That's what people think here. If we're not in an either or situation, you're not actually making any real decisions. That is absolutely untrue. That's why we just throw gasoline on the fire all the time. Decision making can be on a spectrum. It can be contextual. It can be situational. So that's why I don't like either or. I don't even like framing things in an either or way. It's total bullshit.
I think
in general I agree with you, but like as a response to a pandemic, I think it's okay to say whether you're helping like prevent the spread of the pandemic or you're contributing to the spread of the pandemic.
Well, here I'm saying it's a bad model of thinking because
I
agree.
About
no,
America,
certainly.
When we talk about America, black and white issue, I think we're not even talking about like black and white, like we need a contextual response. I think America, it's still like several steps back, you know, black or white, is the virus a problem or not, you know? I think this is a black and white issue, you know? Like
that's what I'm getting at, Daria.
It's like always the same fucking thing over and over and over again.
Is it an issue or you're saying we're not even at the
so
point
like
where
you're giving I was talking about the anti-science community, you know, like I'm talking about people who are saying that COVID-19 is the common cold still. I'll admit, at one point, I thought something along those lines early on, but I quickly realized I was mistaken. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at. That's black and white. You know, is COVID-19 something we should be fighting against? Yes. It's not a nuanced answer. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
And there are people coming out. What do you guys think about this? People coming out. I have a tough time with this because we get crazier and crazier. People come out and they're like,
I'm not in Los Angeles, for example, but I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, screw Los Angeles
right now. It's kind of like, you know what, like you guys in America, like you fucked the lockdown, you know, you shot the bed, and you can't do another one. You know what I mean? So, you know, like it is what it is. You know, like.
Oh my god.
You had your chance to do a lockdown. You fucked it up, and you can't do another lockdown. You know, I read that
Matthias isn't, you know, part of any task force in America.
Well, you don't think this is what this is exactly what they're saying right now?
No, they're rolling back measures. They're closing restaurants. They're closing nail salons. They're rolling back. Like the governor of California said we could potentially go in another lockdown. They're rolling back.
Yeah, it's preparing for
but
it.
I don't think you guys can handle economically like another 2-month lockdown.
Look,
Well,
honestly,
I mean,
like let's
Just trying to wake some people up. God
Yeah,
damn it!
I mean,
Is
I
that what
don't
it
know.
takes? Is that
I
what
don't
it
know. I
fucking
don't know
takes?
if that's true. But let's before because we're actually getting on a pretty lengthy side of the podcast. I wanted to.
unemployment right now in the U.S. is like 50% of the working age population. Right?
Yeah, no, it's insane. It's an
And
unprecedented time.
how sustainable is that?
I mean, I don't think. Well, I think that's a little off topic. I wanted to get back to. I feel like we really haven't commented on like. Actually, no, we have because we said it was all about individualism and somewhat narcissism. So, actually, I guess this is a time for last words. Did anyone want to get something in that they haven't already? We can definitely do a part 2 of this topic because it's a humongous umbrella, and maybe we can assign certain subjects to talk about in certain episodes so we don't get too derailed. But did anyone want to say something?
Matthias, where are you getting this 50% unemployment rate? I've
It's not
seen it.
it's not 50% unemployment rate, but it's 50% of the working age population isn't working right now. You can find
Wasn't
it right
that
now.
unemployment?
Yeah, wouldn't that be almost the
I don't
same?
know. I thought it was strange as well, but I think it's a different type of measuring, different methodology.
Okay. All right. Well, that's quite a comprehensive episode we have here. We got a lot. We had a lot of voices. We had a lot of thoughts, and I'm really thankful for that. Thanks everyone for waking up early if you're on the West Coast, interrupting your afternoon if you're on the East Coast, and joining us at night if you're overseas. I wanted to give you guys a chance to plug anything that you wanted. Usually there are movie recommendations. Some people plug their social media. Some people just have like a poem or something that they want to share. So let's start with Matthias. Do you want to share anything before we leave?
No.
Okay. Evan, what about you?
Everyone should watch the TV show Dark.
Okay.
I would love to have a podcast about it.
Okay.
Great show.
I'll add that to my to-watch list. I'll tell Monica about it.
Put it at the top of your list.
Sure. Oscar, do you want to share anything?
I don't have anything in particular, but I had a great time hearing the different opinions here, and I'm grateful to be on the podcast.
Yeah, it's good to have you, man. I hope you join us again in the future.
I'd love to.
Wonderful.
To.
Let me plug the link about the unemployment number.
You want to plug the unemployment number? All right, we'll come back. Matthias, you find it, and we'll come back to you after we do Zara and Lydia. Daria, go ahead. Do you want to plug anything?
No, not that I can think of.
No problem. Let's start with Zara. Zara, do you have something you would like to plug?
I would like to plug the Ocean's 11 movie because even if you've watched it, you need to watch it again because it's so good.
Zara and I got really drunk the other night, and I think we spent about 45 minutes talking about how amazing the Ocean's 11 franchise is.
That's amazing.
I
love the
Ocean's 12
music.
was a really bad sequel.
The music
Yeah,
is
but
so
this is
high.
soundtrack,
Yeah.
and we were talking about every scene where Brad Pitt eats something.
Yeah. Such a good gag.
It's amazing.
So good. Love it. So Lydia, do you want me to put Ocean's 11 as well for yours, or do you want to plug something else?
No, I just finished listening to a podcast that I really enjoyed called Winds of Change. Winds of Change.
Winds of Change.
It's called Pineapple Studios, and it's about kind of the Cold War cultural tactics used by the US. It's really interesting.
Ooh, a lot of Latin America in there, maybe.
They it's quite a variety. I can't really explain the main, not like the main story of the podcast. You just have to listen to it because it's quite a long story, but really interesting. It's kind of about kind of cultural espionage from the CIA.
Very good.
But
Thank you. Thank you for your contribution, Lydia. And Matthias, finally, we're starting off.
How do I put it in the chat?
No, you don't have to put it in the chat. Just tell me and I'll write it down.
Okay, so businessinsider.com. The title is Just Over Half of Americans Have a Job Right Now. Allanaktar, spelled ALLANAKHTAR.
All right, hold on. ALA what?
ALLANA.
Uh-huh.
Then the new name AAH.
Okay, type it in Discord. Type it in Discord. You're cutting
Where
it
do that?
out, so it's like really hard. Where? Oh, that's a good question. Okay, just send it to me on Facebook, and I'll add it in the document. Okay, that's funny. All right. Well, while he does that, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much, Matthias, Evan, Oscar, Daria, Zara, Lydia, Emma, Lily, Sky, Neil, Keon. You guys were all great. Thanks for being on for as long as you could. I would love to have you guys back. And you can please give me feedback after on whether the number of people was okay and on what you think I can improve in my podcast. But we'll talk about that after we end the stream here. Matthias, did you get a chance to send that message?
I did.
Okay, so let me cut and paste that, and then we will go off the air. Let's do it. Let's do it. Oh, it's a link. Perfect. A link. I mean, I guess if people want to type it all in. Oof.
I mean,
well, there it is.
I just wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
Don't
So
need to include it in reality.
yeah, thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.